these world-class athletes are ready to dazzle you with their high-flying maneuvers, I think they're...
This is the 5th year of the Winter Cities Festival happening in Toronto, and it originally started as a way for us to get Torontonians to come out, enjoy their city, see everything that we had to offer in the way of culture, creativity, and cuisine, and just generally encourage Torontonians to get outside, stop hibernating, and enjoy everything that this great city has to offer in the wintertime.
Winter all the way! Winter! 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 Winter!
You guys want to see another double? Let's make some noise for about that. Crank it up, boys. Here we go.
Believe it or not, everyone thinks we're kind of crazy wingnuts who fling ourselves in the air. We're not that way at all. If you ever actually spend some time with us, met our team, sat down and talked with us, we're all pretty rational, normal people.
It will always be a surprise, it will always be spectacular, and it will always be fun for everyone.
But how do you create money out of thin air?
Mind you, the banks have always done this. It's called the money multiplier.
Fractional reserve banking, also known as the money multiplier, is a practice of banking used by most banks across the world. It functions on the principle that only a fraction of your deposit is kept in reserve for you and others to access.
We required the banks to have roughly 10% of their liabilities on deposit, so that if some people wanted their money, they could get it. But then they could lend out the other 90. And if they could generate a revenue stream from that, and their businesses could generate a revenue stream, that could then get lent out.
It's all created on your signature. So if you borrow $1,000, fractional reserve lending says they can now lend another $9,000 on your signature. So they've created basically $9,000, $10,000, which they've lent back to you $1,000, backed by absolutely nothing. It's just an entry on a ledger, and they want you to pay it back.
Many young people today are borrowing for their education. And then you'll borrow for your first automobile. Then you borrow for the furniture when you leave home. Then you borrow for the mortgage when you get your first house in your early 30s. And then you borrow for the refrigerator and everything. Young people borrow. Inevitably, you're drawn into the system because you want to live better than your income allows you to live.
What happens when a nation's debt far exceeds its income?
The reason we got into so much trouble is that in the US in particular, the investment banks were not part of a retail bank, so they didn't have any deposits. They had less than 1% deposits. So instead of having a multiplier of 10, you had a multiplier of almost 100. And that means that when there's the least bit of lack of confidence in the organization, you find a run. And there's no reserves to stop the run.
Now let's see how Canada's favorite pastime is being infused into Indian culture.
You can hear all of the events today in the games in Italian and in Punjabi.
Hockey Night in Canada has been a Canadian tradition since 1931. Starting out as a weekly radio broadcast, the programming has grown to offer at least a double-header every Saturday in multiple languages. Harminder and Harna Ryan call the games in Punjabi.
Started trying to broadcast in different languages. They actually started in Mandarin, and then last year during the Stanley Cup playoffs at the finals, it was Detroit Red Wings versus the Pittsburgh Penguins, so a marquee matchup. Joel Darling, who's the producer here, he mentioned that if you're going to try other languages, you got to try Punjabi, because that's how it began. And then we did 6 games in the finals, and the response was so tremendous that they renewed the contract for the whole season this year.
These two feel they are spreading multiculturalism by bridging two cultures.
Nothing says that Canada is more multicultural than having, like Perminder said, than having our national game broadcast in different languages.
I am Canadian, and it's my duty as much as anyone else's to be very patriotic to our national fabric.
For these guys, it's all about making people feel welcome in their new country.
And when they go to work, a lot of their colleagues are talking about last night's game or whatever, and this is something that has brought them up to speed about the rules of the game, and they can follow it better, and so they feel more involved.
Predominantly we speak 90% Punjabi, and then there's a 10% English of words that we cannot translate over, or that don't translate over. And by presenting hockey in their own language, that they would be more inclined to watch it.
We just saw how two Canadian pastimes are getting a multicultural twist. With Canadian diversity still growing, sky's the limit for integrating different cultures. I'm Valerie Laye for The Vibe. Now back to the studio.